Yo, what's up, everyone? I got a message in the inbox last night from a CX practitioner out in California, and she is working on essentially putting together her 2025 meeting on customer experience. And her message said, Zach, I'm really struggling to connect the dots between our NPS and ROI that we created in 2025. I have an ELT meeting coming up in a few weeks, and I would love it if you can share how you calculate ROI. That's a fantastic question. Thank you for sending that in. And we're going to take about 8 to 10 minutes to walk you through how I guide other CX leaders to do this exact same thing. Because quite frankly, most of us are either starting our reporting or we're finishing it up. So if you're just finishing up, this will be a really good kind of check for you on does it make sense? And so a lot of times what I see is CX ROI, it fails to hold up in executive team meetings, especially to the CFO. And so I want to start with this. Most CX leaders are stuck trying to prove ROI using NPS, CSAT, OSAT, maybe customer effort, depending on what your metric is. And it's not because you're doing bad work, but quite frankly, you're using the wrong operating model. I'm going to be honest. I've never seen a statistically defensible model that proves a 4-point lift in NPS for the year causes revenue growth. What I see happen too often is correlation. So NPS goes up by a couple points. Our revenue goes up by a couple points. And so we tie this together through correlation. And correlation collapses the moment that we say, okay, let's figure out what 1 point of NPS is worth. And we know every time we increase a point of NPS, our revenue is going to increase. So as an organization, we're going to set targets off of NPS. Well, guess what happens? Gamification, sampling bias, other internal pressures creep in. And at the end of the year, NPS increases, revenue doesn't increase, and now the CX leader is standing there holding an empty bag. And this is really why CX, as leaders, we still struggle for that executive credibility. Not because experience doesn't matter, not because customers aren't important to our executive leadership team, but because we're trying to reverse engineer financial impact from sentiment instead of really engineering business impact through action. And that's the shift I want to give you really today. So here's how I want you to kind of reframe this in your mind. Stop trying to prove ROI through survey math. Start proving ROI through behavioral causation. So the real chain of value looks like this. A customer signal is identified. Now we look at the friction. We could quantify the impact that friction is having. We go into a prioritization session. It gets prioritized. We take action. The action is delivered. So maybe it's a policy update, an experience redesign, whatever that action is. Now we measure trailing behavioral change. And based on that trailing behavioral change, we calculate financial impact. Not survey, dashboard, KPI increase, correlation, which is what a lot of us are doing today. And my rule of thumb is if you can't trace a straight line from the friction you identified to the action your organization has taken, to behavioral change, to your P&L, well, you don't have ROI. You have storytelling. And storytelling is not going to survive in a CFO meeting. So here's a dead simple exercise I use with leadership teams. We're going to walk through this together very, very quickly. I want you to grab a piece of paper, if you don't have one handy, grab something to write with, and very quickly write down 2 to 3 actions your organization took last year based off of customer friction you identified. So write those down. Heck, it could be from last quarter, hell, even last week. But what I want you to do is write down 2 to 3 actions that was directly driven by customer friction. Again, not insights, not themes, actions. Now, From an actions perspective, there's a difference between output and outcomes. If an action is we created a communication guide, that's so what, right? It really needs to be we redesigned, we delivered enablement, like what are those specific things? So again, policy changes, process redesigns, product fixes, experience improvements. Now, for each one, I want you to answer 3 questions for each one of those actions. What was the friction we identified? What specific action did we take? What customer behavior changed as a result? So again, let me give you those 3 questions for each one of your frictions. What friction did we identify? What specific action did we take? What customer behavior changed as a result? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, behavior is what moves financial impact. Did conversion improve? Did your churn drop? Did repeat purchase speed up? Did service demand fall? Did returns decrease? That's how CX becomes economically defendable. And here's the kicker. As you're going through this exercise, most teams are going to realize their list of actions is shockingly small, which tells you exactly why execs don't feel CX impact. Now, this part is critical. Before you ever present this to your exec team, always pressure test it with finance. So before I ever went into an ELT meeting, if I was going to present numbers, I always pressure tested it with the finance team, the team that reported up through the CFO, because if the CFO had questions, he was going to send it down and have it validated. So instead of going through that, which is what I learned, I always had my numbers validated before walking in. Not with marketing, not with my peers, with finance, the team that reported into the CFO, because I knew that they're going to validate it anyways. So I gave myself time to get it validated early. And here's what I did. I basically said, hey, Hawk, here's the friction. Here's the action we took. Here's the behavior change that we're observing in our customers right now. Here's how we're thinking it's impacting revenue, cost, or risk. Can you pressure test this for me? And quite frankly, over a couple days, he would validate it for me. And now when I walked into meetings for an ELT meeting, I wasn't walking in as a CX leader with insights. I was walking in as a business operator with financial credibility. And that completely changes everything. So let me give you a real example so it doesn't stay theoretical. We identified a major friction point in post-purchase experience. Customers were struggling to understand delivery timelines and order status. What does this cause? High inbound call volume or WISMO, escalations, order cancellations, increased refund request. And so instead of launching another survey or just telling stories with sentiment, we redesigned the order confirmation and tracking experience. Clear delivery dates, proactive delay alerts, real-time tracking visibility. And now here's where it gets interesting. On a trailing 3-month behavior, our WISMO call volume dropped by 22%. Order cancellations dropped by 14%. Refund request fell 9%. Finance validated the unit economics. That single experience fix generated 7-figure annual cost reduction, plus incremental revenue retention from reduced cancellations. None of that is correlation. It's all causation. From friction, action, behavior, dollars. That's a CX performance system in action. So here's the question I want every single one of you to ask yourselves right now. If I walked into your CEO's office today and said, what were the top 3 customer frictions your organization eliminated last quarter? And what was the financial impact? Would they know the answer? If not, that tells you exactly why CX still struggles for ownership and influence inside your organization. Now, if you want CX to earn real influence, again, stop trying to connect the dots between NPS and correlating impact. Start engineering behavioral change. because correlation may make CX sound smart. Causation makes CX valuable. Now, I've created a simple worksheet that you could download. I'll put the link in the comments below to this video, free download. Go ahead and hit it and walk through this exercise directly. Until then, have a great day.